Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is September 27, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Michel Delville. Is that correct way to pronunciate it?
Absolutely.
Where in the heck you calling in from?
I'm calling from Liège, Belgium. It's a town, a city in the southern part of Belgium, the French-speaking part.
First question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
That's a tough one. Um, a capacity to improvise.
Wow, you're up my alley, dude. That's what we're going to do for the next 90 minutes. Improvise. Wow, that is a heavy word. Capacity to improvise. Whoa, you really hit me. Okay, what's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Um, I like to work with. I like to have different things on my plate and work with through different channels at the same time. I like to listen to music and read books and um, smells and you know cultivate different ways of approaching the world outside the self. And that some people call this synesthesia,
Yeah.
combining the senses. Um, I feel that I don't like to be limited to one single channel. I like
Yeah.
to you know be immersed in things in a way which exceeds a single sense.
Yeah. No, you did it. It's what form, and you said different forms. That's
Mhm.
fine. Now, you got a bunch of books in back of you. The whole Zoom thing is what do you have in your setting? You don't have guitars back there, you have books. Just a side question. Did you grow up a reader because your parents told you to read? They did it as an example or on your own?
Um, I was told that I learned to read on my own when I was 3 or 4. So, which resulted in my not attending school like just like the other kids, because I already knew how to read. So that's the legend behind, or the myth behind the man or the child I was at the time. I don't know if my parents were right, but this is what they told me. So I was, my mother was, well, still is an Italian immigrant. My father was born in Belgium, and there were lots of books lying around. Um, and later, my brother, who's 8 years older than me, uh, began to study literature at the university. And he was also, the proud owner of a lot of books which were above my head.
Yeah.
But I was still reading them for the pleasure of, reading the prose, and the language itself was seducing, but it was I was just reading anything really,
Yeah.
ranging from magazines to Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yeah. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
It's a matter of survival, I think. Uh,
Do you think this need to collect information is more innate or more invented?
hmm. um, I think it probably started being a necessity, an innate thing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the more civilized you get and the more sophisticated you become as a human being, as a form of life, then it becomes a kind of luxury to learn things that are not useful in life. And
Yeah.
they call it art, I think.
Yeah, are you insinuating art is not useful? That's what Igor Stravinsky said. Is not useful. Okay, you're anticipating a lot of question, Michelle. So we're going to get into this. This is really good. Before we get into music and art too much, do thoughts create emotions?
um, I guess certain words immediately trigger certain emotions and feelings. Writers know how to deal with that. They choose the right words to um, cater for specific needs uh, the readers experience when they look for books that satisfy their needs. Uh, so I'd say yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
um, how can a thinking being answer that question? It's it's like
Wait,
asking a
wait,
fish,
wait,
you
wait,
know.
wait. Michelle, you won. This is about inventing new questions. So you answered a question with a question. That's it. That's what it's all about. No, we'll you're gonna get it. We'll move on. Okay. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
um, I don't know what I think until I start to compose stuff.
Nice. Okay. Can humans think without language?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Chomsky says that language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history of what create creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I scream and I start to sing
What?
stuff.
You what?
I start to. I think I start to scream or I start to sing stuff that is not really language, that does not contain any words. Um,
Yeah.
so I use sound as a channel to express my frustration, just like a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. It's good. Beautiful. Your observations of people in general. I know it's a stupid question, and it's both, but just are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Um, I think um, people in general in 2022, yeah, we think in well, I think we're still predominantly thinking beings, but we think in terms of images, and we're in front of a screen right now, and we're looking at fragments of texts, but we're no longer um, immersed in the same culture as our ancestors. Um, I think we can probably think of the new media culture as something that approximates the status of uh, textual images, so something that's between text and something more visual, that what we would call something probably a picture.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at the screen right now, I'm looking at you and I see the hashtags and the words on the screen. I tend to perceive them as images,
Yeah.
a form of visual poetry. I think in a way which is not the case when I look at a page of, in a book.
Yeah.
Words written on the page do something different to me.
Really well put. In fact, you got a bonus questions because you're so dang smart, and I really love this. This is so much fun. Is TV real?
Hmm. Um, I don't watch TV anymore. I would say that it's as real as the moving image can get.
Yeah.
If you indulge in the suspension of disbelief that makes you believe that what you're watching is true
Yeah.
for the sake of being entertained. I think most people know that TV isn't real, but they still cultivate the illusion that it's real because it's less painful, and it's
Yeah.
we're looking for pleasurable experiences, and that's what we get from it, whether it's
Yeah.
football or reality shows. I
Or Frank's or rare Frank Zappa clips on YouTube. So,
oh
that's the
yeah.
same thing. Yeah, that's real. Is it real? Well, I got it from a Frank Zappa song. eccentrifugal force. It's all about a keyboardist named Corla Pandit. And he asked that question, is TV real? So here's two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I believe in the reality of the soul. It's an abstract notion for me, but I believe that there's a, so I wouldn't um, discard Turing's pronouncement based on the fact that it postulates the existence of a soul, because I, I, I do tend to believe in that myself. Um, I think if the soul survives, whether it's a collective or a personal thing, if it survives our dead bodies, it probably exists beyond language and thinking, but in a way which we cannot comprehend because we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Can machines think?
I've been in touch with a former, well, colleague of mine, a musician with whom I've worked quite a lot in the last 20 years, and he's creating clips, video clips for his music based on text to image AI software, DALI 2, and I tried to create some of this stuff myself in a very amateurish fashion, and the result of the process of creating those images, you enter a number of words, and the result is very predictable and monstrous. There's always something wrong with the proportions or the skin of the characters created through those programs. There's always something very disturbing, which I find personally unacceptable on an aesthetic level. But maybe AI will make some progress and we won't see the difference anymore in a few years' time. But right now, I would say not at all. It's completely.
You insinuated, or it seemed you said the software text to image software that your colleague used was called DALI 2, DALI 2.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, like the painter. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning.
Does the brain, I like you laugh. This is what it's all about, is having a good time and laughing. So thank you. Does
These are
the
great
brain,
questions. I'm laughing because I'm enjoying them.
oh yeah, no, I mean that I interviewed George Carlin's daughter, and she would laugh, then take a deep breath, and then answer it. I goes, that's what it's all about, laughing and breathing. That's all. We're just having fun. Okay. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I think we're creating it
Yeah.
with a little help from our friends out there, the others.
The other people. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
There's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. Thank you. Okay, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. That's what Audre Lorde, the poet, said. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Hmm. Can you, rebuild or alter the structure of a building without knowing the architect's code? Is that what Audre Lorde was saying? Was
Well,
trying to say?
again, you're asking me a question and you win again, because see, I don't know what she was saying. Because when the word master comes in, people, freak out or they don't freak out. It's like, oh, it's a wider open to interpretation. If I just said you can't dismantle the house, So I think she was a little political in saying, the master's house. But I think you get the idea. Keep in mind, Michelle, you put all the questions into the context you want. So you can interpret that any way. I mean, um, George Lakoff said, the neuroscientist says, you use the existing tools and you invent new tools. And then Yvonne Rainer's adding, you expose the tools. So, it can go many different ways. It's up to you, however you want to answer it.
Yeah, I understand that. I appreciate that. It's yeah. I think it all relates to creating things. I'm really interested in poetry, and the word poetry comes from the Greek word for creation, for making. It's like
Yeah.
making stuff. And
Yeah.
that's amazing, because everything, if you think about it this way, everything we do in life is a kind of poetry.
Yeah.
I don't know if it relates to Audre Lorde's poetry,
Yeah.
and her political poem, but when I said improvisation earlier, I was thinking of, I suppose, of Derek Bailey's famous line that improvisation is not knowing what it is until you do it,
Yeah.
whereas composition is not doing it until you know what it is. And that is a quote. That is one of my favorite quotes. Another one is, and it also relates to building stuff, making stuff, is the line that John Coltrane. It's an apocryphal line, but I hope he said it, because it's such a brilliant one. He says, well, he was asked about his way of composing music, and his answer was, most of the time I start in the middle of a sentence and I go both directions at once. And I find that so inspiring. It's one of my favorite lines. I think I want it to be engraved on my tombstone.
Wait, I start in the middle of the sentence and I go what directions?
Both,
Both?
both directions at once.
Yeah. Well,
It's I understand that line in a sense. What he's saying, perhaps, is that he has this capacity to reverse time, to go back in time, and not just look forward, but work with in a more cyclical fashion, and
yeah.
defy the linearity of music. I like that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Dude, you're touching on all the key touchstones. Yeah, we're doing a Zappa salon soon. I really want you to be part of it because this is exactly what we get into. In fact, do you know that Don Preston changed the course of music by telling Train to move on and do something different? Did you know
I
that?
didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't know that.
it's in Billy James's book about the mothers of invention. It's an amazing moment. Don Preston's playing with Elvin Jones, and he goes up and Train comes by and he goes, "Dude, you're doing great, but you got to change. You can't just
Mhm,
keep doing
mhm.
it." And then Train changed. Now, whether Don's statement caused Train to change, who knows? But it's part of a zeitgeist, and it could be. And it
Yeah.
like so, but Derek Bailey, major, not knowing what it is till you do it. That's back to I don't know what I think until I McLuhan says say it, and Joan Didion says I don't know what I think until I write it. But
Mhm, mhm.
now to the word poetry, and we're going to go into poetry is in a set soon, but if it's rooted in the Greek word to make, Eric teaches us that the root word of the word fake and the root word of the word fact is both to make. So if it's faking it or factual, they're both rooted
Mhm.
in this word to make. And what do you make?
Yeah.
Poetry. Yeah. You know, so what new toy do you suggest?
A new toy. Oh, I was looking at the new generation of guitar distortion pedals. earlier today. So I'd probably go for that. I need to visit that big store in Cologne in Germany where they have them on display. You can actually try them and use
Yeah.
them. So that would be my new toy. But maybe your question was more general than that. For that's for me.
Yeah.
My next toy will be a guitar, will be an effect, a new
Yeah.
pedal.
That's good. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I might not wake up in the morning.
Okay, McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. So, when I say artists, I mean musicians, composers, painters, poets. Their artists are antennas of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the inventions. So,
Mm.
Michelle, I asked you the question McLuhan probed his whole career. Why do we humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Hmm. It's a mystery to me. I think it requires a lot of education. It's a long process, you know, of acquiring skills, that the skills that are needed in separating the wheat from the chaff and reading between the lines. They call it critical thinking. I think it's a form of plasticity of the mind. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily about conspiracies and finding ways of understanding things in a different way. It's more about curiosity, I think.
yeah, really
And
well.
I think some people haven't been exposed to stuff that would have interested them if they had been exposed to it from an early age. I tried to do that with my children. They're older now, but they were listening to all kinds of things um, and reading all kinds of stuff that again was above their head. But it doesn't matter because it's about being um, exposed to stuff that is beyond your understanding, and that is also a very poetic notion that you don't need to understand everything
Yeah,
to 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 learn from it.
yeah. That's poetry. That's T.S. Eliot said poetry can communicate before it's understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do artists have moral obligation?
Mhm. Um, yeah, I'm reminded of a few famous sentences by the likes of Faulkner or Zappa. Uh, what was the line that Faulkner said about writing a masterpiece is worth the lives of several old ladies? I think he was referring to Dostoevsky and Crime and Punishment. I wouldn't go
Yeah,
as far as that. I think the moral responsibility of the responsibility of the artist is to be true to itself and
yeah,
write stuff or create stuff that he hasn't heard or read before, possibly.
yeah. Really good. You know this guitarist, Wayne Krantz,
Yeah.
Kran? Yeah. I didn't really know about him. I started watching him. I can't. Anyways, he's very intelligent, and he started
Mhm.
talking about accessibility. Does the artist have an obligation to be accessible to the user?
Mhm.
And it's similar. Like, when most people say, do artists have moral obligation? 80% of people goes, everybody has moral obligation.
Mhm.
And then some of them say, like you, yeah, they have an obligation to themselves. But there's artists that fuck shit up badly, and morally and and is oh, that's bad, like John Waters rooted for the Wicked Witch of the West when he watched Wizard of Oz. Hey, he turned out to be sort of a normal guy. He makes shit and sells it. So,
Yeah.
do artists have an obligation to be kind of accessible, at least. I don't know. I haven't asked anybody this question, but I don't know the wording yet. You can help me. How should I word it? Because you make music that isn't like, you know,
The most accessible kind.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's say, yeah,
Let's put it that way.
yeah,
Let's not be rude. I think most artists, no matter what they say in interviews or privately, need an audience. So if it's
yeah,
if it's two people or three people in a phone booth, it's okay. But you're still writing for someone to read you, and you're performing in front of an audience. Now, I think what a friend of mine and a longtime collaborator of mine, the drummer Anthony Bianco. He's from New York, but he lives in England now, and he's played with many jazz luminaries, including Dave Liebman and many others. He says that he's into free improvisation. So he plays in front of maybe 30, 40 people. Um, and gigs are hard to come by. But he still hates the kind of music that is not, that he calls that kind of music, the kind of free improvisation, moving furniture. And I like that expression because it's self-indulgent, and it doesn't have any spiritual dimension or it's any juicy elements in it, and I find that a little problematic. So I wouldn't say that there is no need to be accessible to an audience. I think
yeah,
there's, yeah, if
yeah,
you want
yeah.
to achieve something, I'm a very big fan of the popular avant-garde. I think it's much more difficult to um, create something which is both experimental, innovative, and popular than to play in front of four people in an obscure club. I think Zappa did that very well, and so did Charlie Chaplin and many others
Wait,
who are part of.
Charlie Chaplin, the
Yeah,
filmmaker?
yeah, yeah. I think if you watch Modern Times or The Kid, it's full of inventions and experiments, but
Yeah,
it's still a commercial movie, and
yeah.
I'm I'm
No,
I'm,
I
I'm
I know
fine with it.
I know what you're saying. Popular avant-garde is a heavy term. Definitely, we
Mhm,
save that for our salon because that's Bobby Bradford played trumpet with Ornette, and Ornette got
mhm.
60 grand. This was like 20, 30 years ago. He got 60 grand for a concert. And Bobby would say, dude, lower your price so we can play more often. you know, but would you say Ornette's popular avant-garde?
Ornette.
Ornette Coleman.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, if there's always an element which is potentially accessible and moving in his
yeah,
music. It can be a melody.
yeah,
It can be a rhythm, an element of rhythm, but it's not completely out there with no
yeah,
intention of pleasing anybody. And that I would find particularly arrogant, and I'm not in favor of that. I'm
yeah.
you know some of the avant-garde stuff I've been listening to for the last 50 years is rather boring, and I'm it,
You mean like Soft Machine?
no, of course
Like
not. Well, the
like
the last
like Sun Ra?
no, 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 no. Sunrise, very juicy. I saw the Sunrise Orchestra 2 months ago in Brussels, and believe it
Amazing.
or not, they were sold out. Marshall Allen at 98 was still kicking,
Jesus.
and he was, two things about that gig. I was amazed to see how young the audience was.
Yeah,
Youngsters ranging from 18 to 25 years old.
Beautiful.
I was an old guy in the audience, and they were all dancing to the music of Sun Ra. And the other thing that I saw Marshall Allen, who had to pack up his own stuff at the end of the
Oh yeah,
gig
no
at,
road.
at the age of 98. Yeah, no roadies.
Still lugging shit around. That is
Yeah,
beautiful. That guy's beyond.
it
Okay,
was so
so
refreshing. Yeah.
yeah, so refreshing, beautiful. So are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
In theory, I'm not afraid of ideas, whether they're old or new. I'm not. No, I wouldn't say
Good.
I'm afraid of them.
Good. Let's move on. Is Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Hmm. Um. huh. I think it was a silent, sunny morning in Italy where my grandfather lived at the time. I enjoyed being in his garden. So it was a privileged moment spent in his garden amidst
Right.
the rabbits uh, and the other animals at his in his farm on his farm. Yeah.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Um, I would say it's a blessing.
Yeah. Tell me someone, Michelle, within your immediate family, just briefly, and then outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you like a role model, and what specifically was that impact?
Yeah, within the family, it's pretty easy because my older brother Gilbert uh, introduced me to all things avant-gardists, and he was playing uh, McLaughlin's Extrapolation and Zappa's Hot Rats, uh, and Coltrane's CDs, and also some of my now favorite psychedelic bands such as Hawkwind and other stuff. I still cherish to this day. When I was when I was 6 or 7, the music was in the house and it was so loud that I could not ignore it, and I was scared. It made yeah, I was scared by Coltrane, especially the late Coltrane. He was playing at full volume. I thought I was going to go to hell or something.
Whoa! Yeah,
I
I
listened to
gotta
that
tell
stuff.
you this. Louis Saul, he's an amazing musician. He almost got the gig to be Frank's secretary. And I was spending time with him for a couple minutes, and his daughter would freak out when she saw Miles Davis on a MTV video. And he would go, "If you don't go to bed, I'm gonna play Miles for you." And she goes, "No, Daddy, no." That's like
Excellent.
disciplining your kids with Train or Miles. Okay, so that was good. Now, outside your immediate family, who had an impact on you? Briefly.
Um, as yeah, as an artist, the guy who had the more impact on my I hesitate to call it my career, but my development as an artist is Elton Dean. The sax player with the soft machine, whom we already mentioned
What did
earlier.
you mainly get from Alton? What did you mainly get from him? You mean
What I
knowing
got
him
from him,
personally or
yeah,
yeah,
before I knew him personally, I thought he was truly unique, and a unique and singular voice in jazz rock, in the field of jazz rock. He was also someone who was approaching jazz rock in during the best years of the soft machine, with Robert Wyatt on drums and Hugh Hopper on bass, and Mike Ratledge on keyboards. They were my Beatles, really. And I thought he has such an incredibly unique voice as a sax player. But then I got to know him because he was instrumental in my band getting a contract with the Moon June label, which is based in New York and is still my current label. And my first official CD was a collaboration between my band, which was called The Wrong Object, and Elton. And it just occurred to me at some stage that he was just one phone call away, and I called him, and we arranged to meet and compare notes, and we decided to play gigs and do an album, which we did. Unfortunately, he died shortly after that. But he was one thing leading to another. He was also even posthumously instrumental in making me in establishing connections between my bands and some British and American musicians.
Beautiful. We're going to get into music soon. A couple more. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yeah, I was raised a Catholic.
Did you ever check out, or are you still practicing?
I'm not practicing. And I don't have any particular animosity towards against Catholicism. I think I've kept the best stuff, and I like the current Pope. You know, I think he's a brave man. But of course, my relationship to Catholicism and Jesus is far from being institutionalized. It's a
Do you
personal.
pray?
Uh, I do, yeah, occasionally, yeah.
If God exists, what do you want God to say to you after you die?
Uh, oh, I wouldn't want him to say anything, but I'm not sure God exists. But and when I pray, I don't really pray God, I think, but
Right.
it's closer to meditation.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Uh-huh. Once a Catholic, as they say, right? I think evil exists.
Yeah. This question really is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? I set up with a few modern thinkers. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemies and don't forget their names. Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thought. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with that. Um, and it also makes it possible for you not to hate them. I think enemies need to be acknowledged, but not hated. I think it's much more useful and fruitful to acknowledge them and then use them as a kind of point of reference against which your actions are directed. I think I like the I need enemies. Who said that? Sorry, I need
Fred,
an enemy.
Federico Fellini,
Oh,
Italian.
Fellini. Fellini, yeah,
I
yeah.
need an enemy. That's like, well, check this one out. I no doubt deserve my enemies. That's Walt Whitman, a poet. I deserve my enemies. Yeah, but you nailed it, because that's American Indians, indigenous say your enemy's your best teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a good teacher, not maybe your best. So, anyways, James Joyce, first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago, he basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Because life doesn't always live up to our expectations, I guess. I remember Oscar Wilde said that he was getting his strongest impressions from the city of London, not watching the actual fog, but reading writers, 19th century British writers writing about the fog. So it's
Yeah.
quite close to what you were describing.
That's great. About the writing about the fog was better than watching the fog.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that one. That is good. Oscar's the ultimate. His best is everything's in public domain. I love that one. Okay, so what, your brother's playing you this music. You're getting scared shitless, but you're finding an aesthetic about music. You're not doing the Beatles, you're doing the Soft Machine. At what point did you go, I can do this? I can write music. Where's your tipping point? Like, did your parents say, okay, we pay for your lessons, you got to take piano? Like, and then at what point do you go, oh, I want to do this? Just walk us through that briefly.
Yeah, my parents never asked me to play a particular instrument. I insisted that I wanted to play the guitar, and they bought me a guitar, and I went to the music academy, and I studied there for several years, and then I became a self-taught musician. Basically, I started to learn stuff by heart, like whole guitar solos by Zappa, but not just by Zappa, McLaughlin. And also, the tipping point was when I realized that I could find musicians in my area to perform the kind of music that I had in my head, and it was difficult, and it took me about 10 years. I was in my late 20s when I found the right guys to do that. And then it became much easier because, like I said, one thing leading to another. I gained enough self-confidence to approach other musicians, and I had recorded stuff that I could showcase to convince them that they should play with me, and it became much easier.
Great. So do you write lyrics and music, or just music? Are you an instrumental composer or both?
I'm both. Yeah,
You write
in
you
recent
write lyrics. Yeah, you write lyrics. Okay.
in recent years, I've written more lyrics than
Yeah.
in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. A screenwriting teacher told me that a great art, great film, great music is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're composing music?
Um, there were two periods in my creative output. The first one, um, I I always started. I was relatively unexperimented, and I always started with a melody, and then I started throwing more ingredients to make it sound like a full piece. And it was wrong, of course, because you can't do that really, and the chords sounded a bit stilted and artificial. So I decided to do it the regular way, compose stuff on on Finale and Sibelius, uh, two programs which allowed me to um, become a bit more academic, not academic, but a bit more um,
Linear?
exacting, linear,
Oh,
perhaps. Yeah, yeah,
exacting. More
yeah.
exacting
Precise and
yeah,
precise. Yeah.
precise. Yeah.
Mhm. And that was when I became aware that I could actually write for big bands and you know sophisticated combos, as Zappa would may have called them.
Yeah. He
Not
called them
exactly teenage, not exactly teenage combos because we
yeah,
were too old.
not rocking teenage combos,
No,
sophisticated. Yeah, yeah,
he was too late for
great.
that.
Yeah, Frank's great line is, "What do you think of jazz rock fusion?" Frank goes, The only fusion I see is between the musician and the cash box.
Well, he was right, you know, and my music is often labeled as fusion, but I hate that word because, you
Yeah,
know, for me, there's a difference between jazz rock and fusion. I don't know what you know if Frank Zappa would agree with that, but I think to me, fusion is a kind of stew that does not allow you to recognize the ingredients that it mixes. So where's the jazz? Where's the rock? Where's the classical component?
yeah,
Jazz rock for me is much more interesting because you can still see it's not a seamless mix. You can still hear the conflicting influences. And I think that Zappa did a lot to make it work by also by combining by making different kinds of musicians work together. Some of them couldn't even read music, others were had graduated, like Ian Underwood and
yeah,
well, both Underwoods from prestigious music schools. And I mean, the ingredients could be. It's like when I eat a dish, I like to know what's in there, and that's what happens with music too.
yeah.
So jazz rock rules, fusion sucks.
That is good. Rules. Fusion sucks. Yeah, we could do a whole salon on that. So let's finally go into music. What's the function of music?
Hmm. Um, the function of music is to relieve us from the need to think, to create the conditions for the sense of abandon that is necessary for any spiritual experience. For me, music is a Coltrane, even Zappa, who was of course a very materialistic thinker and composer. There's always something, some other dimension that we can reach because we do not have to think. We instrumental music in particular works that way for me at least.
Yeah, that's the main thing. When I asked Don Preston all these questions, he sort of reiterated that don't think. But
Hmm.
Thelonious Monk said all musicians are subconsciously mathematicians. So,
Hmm.
there is a paradox there in to relieve the need to think is I love that as a function of music, but how, could Don Preston be the great keyboardist is he just celebrated his 90th birthday,
Yeah.
played played a backyard party with Bunk Gardner, talk
Oh,
about,
did he?
yeah, talk about, what I wanted to say that one thing you said, if, when you play, your friend plays music before 30 people, you know,
Hmm.
as Nicholas Lenimsky would say, and half of them are sleeping. But when Derek Bailey played here in Santa Monica once at McCabe's, after 5 minutes, he looked up and he goes, "Nobody walked out yet?" He was, like, disappointed that no one had walked out. But,
Yeah.
there is a, you know, something going on there, and so, we know there's thinking involved in making music. Um, so, uh Copeland said the four elements of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. So you brought up this thing about melody. I'm curious because I use question tone color in layperson's term. And then they go timbre. I goes, that's not layperson's. And then they'd go, it's the instrument, it's the sound. So I sort of tossed that away. And now I'm starting to ask people, how do you navigate those four major elements? Because you purposely or you consciously told me you were like what, more accentuating melody or more involved in melody? And then how does one navigate those four elements? Do you now, after your second period, try to integrate all four equally, or do you stress one or the other? What do you start with? Melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. How do you navigate those?
Um, I think tone color has become, I may, one may call it timbre,
Yeah,
maybe the
timbre.
specific sound
Yeah.
is becoming more and more important over the years for me, because I've been learning to play electronic sounds on the guitar. I'm using a guitar synth almost systematically these days. And also, I'm using samples which I create on Ableton. I pay more attention to the materiality of sound, the physicality of sound, than before, where I was taking the sound or the color of sound
Yeah.
for granted. I'm not taking it for granted anymore. I'm not um, a very apt technician, but I do pay attention to the color. Of course, rhythm, harmony, melody. Melody's always been with me as a kind of narrative
Yeah.
force behind the music. I think um, I'm rhythm. Yeah, I was very influenced by prog rock, and so asymmetrical or odd metric structures. Lots of stuff in 7/4 or 7/8 or 5/4 or 5/8, which has become a cliche of progressive music. But I still love to hear that, because there's a
Yeah.
sort of stumbling, uh, syncopated quality to that rhythm, which I enjoy, and which is quite exciting.
Yeah, that's good.
Harmony maybe less, maybe my less. It's not my strongest point.
Yeah, and you knowing Frank's stuff so well, just off the top of your head, where was Frank's strength of those four? Do you think he was integrating all four, or was he melody, harmony, rhythm, tone, color more?
I think tone color was more important to him during the later part of his career, maybe when he started to use the synclavier, and also when I see him in the very late footage of him directing the Ensemble Moderne. He seems to be attracted to sound as a kind of physical entity, rather than something which is necessarily associated with melodies and harmonies. But I'd say that at the beginning, my guess is that his compositional methods were quite academic, quite conventional. Um, it's interesting. Well, I recently listened to the Hot Rats box, containing all the rehearsals. Well, not all of them, but some of
Yeah,
the rehearsals and some of the
yeah,
embryonic versions of "It Must Be a Camel" and "Little Umbrellas," etc. I find that fascinating, and it seems to me what I was surprised to hear was that the 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 the, the pieces had evolved much more than I thought.
yeah.
I thought his mind was so rational that he needed to have everything written down before he even went into the studio to meet his musicians. But it was far from being the case according to those archives. And this was really a revelation to me.
Yeah,
He was
that's
even
good.
sloppy at
Yeah,
times.
yeah, yeah. No, I that's why I don't listen to that stuff. But I thank God for people like you can tell me that, so I don't have to waste my life doing that because I'm satisfied with 60 albums by him. But anyways, this is a good one.
Yeah.
Back to Louis Salt. Louis studied with Nadia Boulanger, and she took "It Must Be a Camel" in and played it for her, and she goes, "Oh, that's good."
Oh, that's a good
So
one.
here's Dave Liebman. You brought up Dave Liebman. He says the three tenets are hand, head, and heart. My friend calls it
Mm,
taste, technique, and theory. Technique, you learn what you're doing. How to do it. Theory is you know what you're doing. How does one acquire taste?
Hmm. Well, I didn't know Dave had said that, but
Well,
he's a
Dave
wild.
What Dave says the 3 H's, so I just apply it. Head would be theory, hand
Yeah.
would be technique. He we sort of connected those. Taste would be heart, but whatever.
Mhm,
You know what? You brought up the word aesthetic. Sometimes I say,
mhm,
is taste aesthetics? It's you. Why'd you gravitate towards, you know, Soft Machine instead of the Beatles? There's something there. How did you acquire taste? Is the question.
Um, how does one acquire taste?
Or it's probably not the right verb. It's how do you establish taste? How
Mhm,
does it,
mhm,
it's just like discerning. I think you said the word discerning earlier. Like, how does one
mhm.
learn how to discern, you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't be as arrogant as to pretend that I more discerning than others, but I think by throughout the years, what I've done, like many, I think most listeners, is to uh, go for the stuff that I find gratifying because I don't necessarily know what happens after a couple of bars. If it's too predictable, it's boring. The same goes for cinema and painting, especially with narrative forms of art. If you know where we're heading for, it's not no longer interesting. Now, I don't despise predictability. I mentioned psychedelic music before, and I'm a big fan of the early Pink Floyd, um, and especially British psychedelic bands such as Hawkwind. Uh, I think for me, they are the missing link between free jazz and Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
But what I'm looking for when I listen to psychedelic rock is a different kind of experience, a different kind of intensity, which I think has to do with the sheer strength of the music, the volume, the the, the the sound of the guitars, and the sense of immersion that you feel when you're listening to it. And it's quite hypnotic, and it's not at all something I would consider as inferior to Zappa or anybody else.
No, that's good. How about just off a side question? What do you think of Grateful Dead? Eh? Or
Eh,
Okay, thank you.
Dark
McLuhan
Star,
said,
I like Dark Star. I like
yeah,
Dark Star. It's the only, yeah.
yeah. No, I saw Jerry Garcia open for Frank Zappa once. The Jerry Garcia band. Here was the amazing thing, because Deadheads, are I mean, Zappa heads are snooty, Deadheads aren't. And during the middle of a Frank Zappa solo, the it was probably, I'd probably say more Deadheads than Zappa. It was in Chicago, and they would start clapping. Now, I'd been to many Zappa shows and they don't clap when Frank
No.
ends his solo. And that's like, to me, showing these people are much more appreciative of what's happening here, because I always contend, if you when Overnight Sensation came out, you could take 3 seconds of a Zappa solo and 3 seconds of a Jerry Garcia solo and not tell the difference. They're
Mhm.
incredibly close, and you could have done that at that concert. It's just that Frank came out of urban blues and Jerry came out of country blues, or
Mhm.
bluegrass. So, anyways, here's a
Yeah.
McLuhan quote I'd love for you to comment on. Song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference.
Mm. That quote speaks to me a lot because when you were mentioning the Deadheads clapping, I was immediately reminded of the cultural differences between different countries I visited as a musician. and the way different audiences relate to the music. If you go to, I'm from Belgium, right? And I'm from the southern part, the French-speaking part of Belgium. Uh, a, a lot of bands who visit Belgium for the first time are amazed by how silent and undemonstrative the Flemish are when they listen to music. That's because they listen to it religiously, and you won't hear any clapping, you won't hear any cheers. And then a lot of bands and musicians who visit Flanders for the first time think that the audience is not enjoying the show, but far from it. Of course, they are religiously listening to the show, and refraining from adding any sound to what they feel is an experience which mustn't be altered by anything outside the performance. Whereas in other parts of Belgium and Europe and in the United States, I think it's quite similar. You have, I mean, the crowds are more keen to participate in the show. So that is one thing that the McLuhan quote
Yeah,
reminds me of.
good. What's more fundamental, music or language?
Music.
Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
Does humor belong in music? Um, Peaches and Regalia doesn't make me laugh, but it makes me happy. Every time I'm down, and I've been down quite a lot in recent years, um, I play that song and it makes me feel better. It doesn't make me laugh though.
Yeah.
I
Eventually,
mm,
yeah, eventually email me because I'm looking for a song that makes you laugh. What's the function of laughter?
um, I think laughter is a way to purge us of our
Yeah.
darkest emotions. That is the way I feel. You know, that guy, that French philosopher called Henry Bergson,
Yeah.
wrote a book on laughter in 1900 or 1901.
Yeah.
He said that laughter was a way to recognize that there's something mechanical encrusted on the living. What he meant, I think, was that it makes us realize that we are merely organic machines, and that things go wrong, and that we have to accept them, and that there's some relief to be derived from that acceptance. And I believe in that. I think it's a redeeming quality to have a sense of humor. I'm not sure sounds in themselves can have a sense of humor, although I know this was one of Frank's big projects and big obsessions. Without the element of performance, I'm not sure about that. But if you consider the element of performance, I suppose that. But I can't think of any songs that really made me laugh, instrumental songs. But if I can think of one, I definitely email you.
Beautiful. Couple more music questions. Ben Ratliff, he is a music writer. He says, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So, me and you might agree when he said Miles is two adjectives: fragile and pointed. Coleman Hawkins, mellow, generous.
Mm.
Train, slightly undercooked and urgent. Tell me two adjectives that you would be grateful if some critic, music writer that you respected would, you know, sort of sum up Michel's sound in two adjectives. They have to be
Yeah,
an adjective, two words.
yeah. Um, I guess honest and 2 words, right? And intense.
Really good. Yeah, the question's been a problem because people feel they have to be humble, and it's like, yeah, I'm putting you on the spot, but what do you give me 2 words for frank.
Um, hmm, give me just a couple of seconds.
No, no hurry, dude.
um, complex and joyful.
How about Elton Dean?
Melancholy and poignant.
Poignant is the second word?
Yeah,
What's the first word?
melancholy.
What's it mean?
Um, sad, but in a good way.
Oh, melancholy, sad.
Melancholy. Sorry.
Melancholy. Oh, good. Melancholy and poignant. That was good. So here's Paul Bley. You know this pianist, Paul Bley?
Yeah, of
Anyways,
course.
yeah. Yeah, I spent many years learning how to play as slow as possible, and then many years learning how to play as fast as possible. I spent many years learning how to play as good as possible, and then I spent many years learning how to play as bad as possible. My solo piano playing is a question in itself. The question is why, and after why comes what, and after what comes when. I don't know a question, but basically, there's 5 why and the W words: who, what, when, where, and why. Wait, what? I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the most important why W word for you?
Well, first of all, if I may react to what he says
Oh,
about
please
learning
do.
to play. Yeah, learning to play uh, slow and then as slow as possible and then as fast as possible, um, and also learning to play badly.
Yeah,
Uh, so I'm assuming that he's referring to the act of becoming unschooled, of getting rid of all the strictures of your musical education and becoming a modern primitive again.
yeah,
I find that extremely fascinating because the more you learn, the more there's this nostalgic feeling that some of your best stuff may have come about when you didn't know so much about the art of writing
yeah.
music or literature or anything. So that is something that speaks to me a lot. And
No,
about
let's you don't have to
yeah,
do the W question, but you can. But I just need to respond to that. That's why you're on a podcast called "I'm Probably Wrong About Everything." No,
yeah,
but that's like Fireside Theater said. Everything you know is wrong. And what I got from what you just said, Michelle, was it's hard to unlearn what you
yeah,
know. Yeah,
yeah.
that's Miles. Miles went up to Barry Finnery or whatever his name is, and he said at a session to the guitarist, he says, "Play the guitar like you don't know how to play the guitar."
Mhm.
It's like,
Yeah.
good luck. How are these guys going to erase, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
and go that? But here's the if you want to do the 5, why, what, when, who, or where?
You mean what do you
In any
expect from me?
context, in
Just
any
start with
context.
one of them? Yeah.
No, in any context, what's the most important for you?
Oh, okay. Definitely not the why.
Yeah.
Um, where, I think you have to
Oh,
create.
here's
You have to create opportunities where you are, or move to some other place.
you mean why is the first and where is your second?
Why is definitely the last one.
Oh,
Yeah.
where is the first?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. You know Thomas Nordegg?
Remind me of who he is. I think I
He's
know him by name, but
he's the greatest guitar tech living on earth. He was Frank's guitar tech, then he's
oh,
Steve Vai's guitar tech. And when Ingve plays his guitar, and he's up front of the stage. He flips his guitar in the air and it goes way backstage, and Thomas goes whoop, and he catches it. Anyways, Thomas is this amazing guitar person. His is when. The most
Yeah.
important question is when. Yours is where. Most people say why. Anyways, I dropped that question years ago. For what reason, I'll never know. So, anyways, tell me, you sort of talked about it in your period 1 and period 2, but tell me one major element that's changed in your composing. Let's go back to your first thing, the capacity to improvise. No, let's say put in improvise. Tell me one major element in improvising that's changed and one major element that stayed the same.
Yeah. I was since speaking of probably wrong about everything. The name of my first band, which is still around, is The Wrong Object. So this says a lot about the kind of tentative method we were using at the time, 25 years ago, to play our music. The thing that changed, I think, in the course of the last 25 years is that there's more emphasis on structure than before. So improvisation is still important, but I've learned to, for better or for worse, to combine a very strict composing method with openings, providing opportunities for the musicians to improvise. So whereas at the beginning it was all based on improvisation and very modal, modal jazz oriented. So that is what has changed. What has remained the same is, I think, my desire to blur the boundaries between improvisation and written music. I think most of the stuff I like, I still like about the music I've made, is when it sounds improvised, whereas it's completely written out, or the opposite, when it sounds like it was composed, but it's in fact improvised. And then when it sounds like that, I'm happy.
Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
My main weakness is that I can't play everything. I'm not a virtuoso. My technical abilities are rather limited compared to those of the musicians who work with me, who all graduated from the best music schools in Belgium. So the way I turn this strength into this weakness into a strength is by playing the part of the music director and the composer, and distributing the stuff amongst the band members so that I would not make a fool of myself on stage. And there's always someone who's better than me, who can play the very difficult stuff.
It's good.
It's a frank confession.
It's a what?
It's a frank confession.
Oh, it's a frank confession. That was good. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate you being articulate and honest. So I asked for 90 minutes and we got 15 more. Can you go over 15, or you got to end in 15?
No, we can go over 15. Yeah, I mean it's only
another, like we could go another 10, or could we go another 10, or could we go another 30 minutes, say?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that just gives me an idea. So McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like a human sensorium is what he calls it. Because the knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Religion or philosophy extends consciousness. It doesn't have to be tangible. What does the guitar extend for you? What humanness?
Hmm. I think, um, well, for a lot of guitar players, the guitar is mainly an extension of a certain form of virility, or an extension of their penis. Well, I think that's the guitar hero myth. But when I play the guitar, I think it's a way for me to give voice to something that is inside me that I cannot verbalize, that I cannot put into words. And that is a story I'm telling. I think a good gripping guitar solo tells a story, right?
Yeah.
There's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end, but not necessarily in that order as Jean-Luc Godard, who died last week, would say.
Yeah.
That is also what Coltrane was saying when he said, I start in the middle of a sentence and I go both directions at once. It's
Yeah.
so yeah, giving meaning and expression to something that we cannot express through language.
Yeah. That quote really evoked in me the train quote is James Joyce said in about Finnegan's Wake, he was trying to bear through a mountain in two directions and
Mhm.
trying to hit in the middle. It's the same it's similar to Train.
Yeah, it's also a loop, right? The novel is a loop.
Finnegan's Wake is a loop. You're right, man. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction.
You've accomplished a lot in your life. How do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Ambition, luck, but forced luck, right? Uh,
What's forced luck
Forced
mean?
in a sense, you have to force it into happening to you. You have to take risks and uh, be daring, right? Enough to make things happen. So luck is a problematic category for me because I cannot consider it independently from a certain approach to life, which makes you uh, capable of reaching out to the right people at the right moment. So it's kind of opportunistic strategy, but not a bad one, I think. And then skills,
I didn't get the adjective there. It's kind of a what?
opportunistic. It's kind of
By
well, you
portion?
have to you have to look out for your own interests and think about ways of making it possible for you to continue your work. And that is maybe a form of compromise, but it's also a way to of being in tune with the world outside, and that brings you luck. Luck doesn't come out
There's
of nowhere, I think.
Yeah, Gary Player, the golfer, said the more you practice, the luckier you get.
That's skill or work. I think it's more work than skill.
Yeah. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Right now, it's English, but
What
when I
form?
return to my work tomorrow,
Yeah, but it's more metaphorical. What form is your inner
yeah, no,
consciousness? Yeah.
I know, but I was. It's not an easy question to answer. I was trying to get away with it. Um,
That's good. one person said, "You're trying to trick me with these questions." I goes, "Dude, everything's a trick. I mean, I'm not vicariously trying to trick you." That was good. You're trying to get that was good, Michelle. So we should go back. So you said English, and then what'd you say? Because I sort of interrupted you because
Yeah,
I didn't
and then
get it.
when I meet my kids in the morning, it will be French. But yeah, I wasn't thinking metaphorically, of course.
Yeah.
I
So
mm,
you mean being raised in Belgium, you learn French first,
being raised in southern Belgium, yes, you do.
and then are you teaching the kids English also, or they learn that too in school?
They learn that too in school. I don't speak English at home with my children.
Right. Huh. Well, back to poetry for a second, because you brought it up earlier. Louis Bersani studied Mallarmé, the symbolist poet. I'm curious your comments on this thought, because it could apply to music or anything. The very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition.
Yeah, the word crisis. But Mallarmé wrote that essay called "The Crisis of Verse," right, which was a major essay in late 19th century poetics. Um, for me, Mallarmé is a guiding consciousness in contemporary art, not just in modern poetry, because of his emphasis on silences and space. I mean, this all predates John Cage and a lot of minimalist and conceptualist musicians and writers. Um, I think he's a very important writer and a very important artist, um, because he's more of a philosopher than a poet. This guy, he's a bit like Wallace Stevens. He's also a phenomenological writer disguised as a poet. He's also an incredibly uh, inspiring prose poet, and the more I read poetry, the more I realize that what I like is prose poetry, which is very
Yeah.
popular in the United States, by the way, perhaps more than in France, but and Belgium. But Mallarmé, yes, um, the
Well,
importance
this
of
is what
space and silence.
yeah. And space is like I didn't ask you the question. Um, Miles talks about the space between notes. How do you navigate space between notes? And then Thelonious Monk said, silence is the loudest sound in the universe. But, I'm curious, since you're well versed in this, what does effects precede causes mean to you? Because this is something that the symbolist, I'm just going to explain you this and then you tell me your reactions to it. And not that it's right. The symbolists like Mallarmé, Rimbaud, Verlaine got from Edgar Allan Poe effects precede causes. That's reasoning backwards. In fact, Mallarmé said it. You don't paint. I'll give you the exact quote. Don't paint the thing itself. Paint the effect it produces.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like we learn television's effect from Surratt's pointillism, and then we got electronic pointillism. And we already knew what that was. That mosaic thinking was already in our heads because we got it. The effect came before the cause. So
Mm-hmm.
any thoughts on that in regards to anything, even Zappa or Train or Soft Machine or your knowledge of poetry and literature? Effects precede causes.
Yeah, of course, the symbolist take is very specific, and it relates to uh, a a kind of aesthetics that considers that realism is not really an issue, and that you have to create your own reality. It's the only reality that matters, the artificial reality that you create through words or painting. So that is a kind of autonomous reality that uh, those guys were cultivating. Uh, my thoughts on this is, well, I think um, Train was and Hendrix and all the musicians I admire the most succeeded in creating an alternative reality. When you listen to a Love Supreme, or to a Hendrix CD, you are immediately encountering a reality which is theirs, and which doesn't have to be connected with anything you know in order for you to enjoy it to the max. Uh, I think that's the kind of autonomy that the symbolists were trying to establish, um, and I find that very valuable, because there's no need to be rooted in a specific context to enjoy their stuff. It's not elitist. It's just
Yeah.
weirdly and strangely unique and singular.
No, you nailed it, dude, because you anticipated the next question. You must have ESP, Michelle. Is perception reality?
Um, I would say yes, but I wouldn't want to sound like I'm a complete relativist. That everything is relative and everything is a construction of the mind, because I think this ideology has been used and abused over the last 50 years. And there are certain forms of suffering and certain forms of uh, collective celebration as well. It's not just about bad things that
Yeah.
are that I still consider to be more objective than others.
Yeah.
Uh, when I see people out there in the streets, uh, homeless and almost dying on the pavement, I don't think it's a construction of my mind. I think it's one of the legacies and mm, the big effects of neoliberalism. I don't believe we should all put into a perspective which would be relative for every one of us. I think we share the same reality. It's like a cubist painting. We're looking at the same object from uh, different perspectives, from below, from above, from right, from the left. But it's still the same object. It's still the same chair, the same guitar, the same naked female body that Picasso and Braque and the others are presenting to us. It's not. It's not a different object. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Really well put, Michelle. I'm glad you brought up homeless, because I've befriended homeless people in Venice, California for 40 years. And one of them did exactly that. He's, he has whatever you want to call it, neurodiversity, and highly influenced by 200 Motels and Just Another Band from LA. And he created a whole nother rock opera musical like Frank would do, that's very Frank-ish, but it's like that's what Frank wanted to do for you to do. Don't just fucking, you know, be retro and do zap, reinvent me, and that's hard. It's back to this tool thing. You can use the existing tools, reinvent the tools, or expose the tools. So it is fun. This thing is, how do you not just become a Zappa cover band, and take it a little farther.
Mm.
Like, the greatest was, Bob Dobbs talked to Zappa from the grave, which is like, "Ah, that's bullshit. You can't do that." He says, "Doesn't matter." The question he asked Frank was, "So what does Edgar Varese think of your music?" So, you imagine the question alone is mind-blowing. It doesn't matter if you believe anything. That's a mind-blowing question. You see Frank walking down the hall in heaven, and he sees, "Oh, Edgar Varese's room." He knocks on the door, and he goes, "Edgar, my hero." And Edgar
Mm.
probably has three choices. He'd go, "Get the fuck out of here, you punk rock star. You ripped me off." Two, he'd go, "Hey, Frank, you did okay." Or, "Frank, sit down. You fucking cloned my ass. Great." Here's Spike Jones, and we could talk about how good you were Edgar Varese, Spike Jones wannabe.
It's a nice gathering.
So, two of my film heroes say their mantras: ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self expression. And the great jazz pianist Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. It's a stupid question. I know it's both and it depends, but your thoughts. Is art making, music making more self expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Mm. Yeah, I think technology, culture, and the environment are dominant. I think there's been a tendency for some writers and artists, especially in the 20th century, to pretend that they can write or create stuff that does not uh, belong to the ego, that is either spontaneous, like automatic writing for the surrealists, for example, which turned out to be a sham because they discovered their manuscripts, and they discovered that they were changing a lot of stuff and revising their supposedly automatic spontaneous prose based on the dreams that they were awaking from, and it was all a hoax. Then there's John Cage and others aiming for an ego-less music. I don't believe in that. I think the more you attempt to bypass the ego, the more you demonstrate your obsession with it, and there's no end to this process. So I don't think it's the most fertile way to escape from the necessity to create from the ego. Um, like you were saying earlier at the beginning of this interview, that uh, most musicians need an audience, whether they want it or not. Or at least you were implying that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the ego can be bypassed. I think one of the most interesting examples I found on that level was Brian Eno's. Brian Eno in the 1970s, he released a box of cards for promoting creativity, and it was called Oblique Strategies. And you would draw a card at random, and the card would say, make a sudden unpredictable action, or it would say, resist changes, or convert melodic element into rhythm or into a rhythm element, things like that. And I think that's a very interesting. I've used that cardboard. Now it's an application. You can find it on the web, or you can buy it as an application for your phone. But I think that's a much more interesting way of not bypassing the ego, but of decentering it, and making it possible for you to look at yourself while you're creating something. It's acting like a mirror, and urging you to make a different move. And you can choose another card if you're not happy. But decentering rather than bypassing, I think it's much more fruitful.
You sure taught me a lot there, passing. That's good. Um, Brian helped sell McLuhan's books a few years ago, saying Marshall McLuhan changed the world with one sentence, and
Mm.
he might have gotten that idea because Marshall released this deck of cards way back before Eno's cards that was
Well, I didn't
similar.
know that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's similar. It's I forgot the name, but you can go online and get the Dew Line cards or something. I think it's Dew Line cards. You can get the whole thing online free. It's just shows you what
Hmm.
it's just pithy sayings. And I definitely have to send you McLuhan's if you haven't read it. Narcissism as Narcosis, his essay.
Yeah, I read it.
It's really
Yeah.
so my friend is a comedian. He wrote for Robin Williams. I says, can satire be destructive? And he said, yeah, that's the job of satire. But we know if you do a cartoon in a certain country and they kill you, some people think dying is destructive. So Swift said that he compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Hmm. Um, I haven't really practiced satire myself a lot as a composer, but I think, um, yeah, the last definition you've just quoted suggests that satire is a sort of implies a certain form of blindness to our own failings, right?
Yeah,
You make fun of other people, but you don't see how stupid and ridiculous you are, something like that.
yeah,
I think the best satire is incorporating a certain element of self mockery.
yeah,
Uh, Otherwise, it becomes an attack, uh, humorous or not, against certain individuals, certain communities, certain types of individuals. Um,
that's good. It's
I
like
Yeah.
great Zappa line is, watch the Nazis run your town. Now go home and check yourself. You think we're singing about somebody else.
Mhm. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I saw Frank sing Broken Hearts for Assholes, and he'd point at people in the audience, go, you're an asshole, you're an asshole. And then he'd point at
Mhm.
himself and go, you're an asshole.
You had a sense of the grotesque. I think the
Yeah.
grotesque is a major mode in Frank's music, right?
Yes.
Distortion, exaggeration, caricature. Yeah, his lyrics do that.
Yeah. It's good. So you create what you resist. This is a saying. I'm not saying you, but one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate.
Mhm.
James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve.
Mhm.
Totally Zappa. And Louis Buñuel. Thank God I'm an atheist.
Mhm.
Any comments on this thought? You create what you resist. One creates what one resists.
Yeah, I think it works for both sides of since most all these quotes have something to do with belief and religion. I think it works on this for the bigots who are inevitably attracted to the stuff that they pretend to hate the most.
Yeah,
It's a kind of return of the repressed, right? And then Zappa encapsulated that in his lyrics on Jimmy Swaggart and the televangelists.
yeah,
But it also works for the other camp. If it's never entirely possible to satirize or attack the culture into which you were born and raised, because it will always return with a vengeance.
yeah,
If you acknowledge that, it's better, I think. Or then you become a kind of inverted religious freak, like the Marquis de Sade, who was attacking institutionalized religion, but replicating it through rituals which were just as
Yeah.
oppressive as
Yeah.
those he was denouncing. So I think if you acknowledge the impossibility of for the fish to uh, imagine something different from the aquarium in which he is living,
Yeah.
you're getting somewhere which approaches the condition of lucidity.
Yeah. So that's a direct McLuhan thing, fish out of water. Did you grow up reading McLuhan at all?
No, I discovered him in my first year at college. In
Really?
college, yeah,
Because they
yeah.
told you to read them or on your own?
No, I read it on my own. I was studying at the University of Illinois at the time, and it was yeah another
University of Illinois.
yeah at Champaign Urbana, and that's where I discovered him. But it was not part of it was not an assigned reading. It was
Yeah.
something I discovered on my own, or maybe because someone told me I should. I knew some rudiments like hot versus cold and things like that,
Yeah.
but I felt the need to. And then recently I mentioned Charlie Chaplin earlier, but he wrote about Joyce and Chaplin too, and I discovered that he was much more wide ranging than I thought he was. So, and I still have to learn from him. I know you're a big expert, so
Well, yeah, but the
uh,
other thing is, did you ever read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people?
I no, I never did. No,
Yeah.
no.
It
But I
it's
said,
really where
yeah,
it's really
I
where Marshall learned everything he knows from Finnegan's Wake and the
mhm,
symbolists. He said, "If you don't know the symbolists and, Joyce, you can't get me." But anyways, I was curious because you were dropping some of these things, and it's like, this guy knows McLuhan. It's really refreshing, it's not something people general Frank even discounted McLuhan in the you ever read the Bob Marshall interview with, uh
oh yes, I did, but I don't remember that particular
well, yeah,
bit.
he doesn't it's just a brief quickie, but he does
Mhm.
list James Joyce in the Freak Out, which is pretty
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, a couple more and we're out of here. What fun. I really appreciate it. Can you forget to die?
Hmm. I can't forget the thought of dying. I forget to die in a metaphorical sense. You die every second, right? Or even in a physiological sense, your brain cells and the rest of your cells. Well, it's a truism. Everybody knows that, but change and die, and then more new cells
Yeah.
um, take their place, and you become a new individual every 3 or 4 minutes, or continually. So if that's the kind of death you can forget about, maybe the mutation, the constant um, organic decay and rebirth of the human body, then we can forget about death and consider death as one more stage in that process, perhaps, or maybe
Well
not.
put. No one's ever answered that question that way. That was brilliant. How do you find peace of mind?
Listening to music, um, yeah, I don't find peace of mind watching films or reading books. I think um, playing and listening to music. Yeah,
That's
definitely.
Walter Pater. All art aspires to the
Inspired
condition of
condition music.
like like painting and films, poetry wishes it could be as cool as music. They go,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I wish we." If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Hmm. Um, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Things will be all right in the end.
Beautiful. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
A Belgian maverick.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Marzipan.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
It would be made of wood and it would be um, out there in the garden.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Mm, something good I never had and never want.
Yeah, it's good. You never had it, but you never want it.
Um, pride.
Dang,
If it's something good.
I've never had that answer. Pride. You know the three answers I get? Fame, money, and heroin.
I thought about fame and money, but yeah, no. I thought, yeah. It occurred to me that I could
Yeah.
say that, but for some reason
Pride
I
is
didn't.
good. Yeah, pride is good. You never had it and you never want it. That's good. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Hmm. Um, is that a matter of choice, choosing between the two? Um,
No. Well, yeah, I mean, see again, you answered a question with a question. Yeah, that you tried to decipher what the question really means by saying, "Is there a choice there?" Yeah. I
yes.
mean, it is implied a little that there's a choice, but there's I'll tell you some of my favorite answers, but I'm not asking for a witty answer or a smart answer. I'm just asking for your hunch or your guess or your intuition.
I guess I'd throw the bag of shit back at the guy.
Now that was good because you're assuming it's a guy. That I've never had that. I threw this is one of my favorites was I'd never be in a situation like that. But you being a lover of poetry and this woman on Venice Boardwalk said to me, I take the velocity of the bag of shit and use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. So that I said, that's the short story by Edgar Allan Poe called Descent into the Maelstrom. He watches the broken sailboat parts swoop him down to his death, and instead he uses the whirlpool to swoop him way out and save himself. So,
Yeah.
what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Definitely not text to image AI. Uh, frankly, I don't know if
Okay,
anything inspires me at the moment in
that's
terms of
fine.
cultural shift.
Couple more and we're out of here. Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Michel, you've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not implying you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
It reminds me of that short story by Henry James, The Figure in the Carpet, which is about, as far as I can remember, a scholar or a writer who leaves his work unsolved, and the task of the remaining characters is to figure out what the secret is, what the general pattern of his work is. And now, are there artists who deliberately uh, leave things unturned and deliberately make it impossible for their readers to understand their work, or at least part of their work? Maybe Joyce was one of them, because after all, he generated a whole industry of
Yeah.
academic readers and interpreters and close readers and
Yep.
speculators. Um, yeah. Um,
But let me clarify a word. You said the scholar leaves his work unsold, SOLD, or untold? You mean
untold. Untold. Mm.
TOLD, untold. Yeah.
ULD. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. That's speculative. That's like, have you watched Tyler Bartram's or any of the tutorials on Zappa? You know, Tyler Bartram's, he
I'm not
broke
aware of
down
that.
he broke down Alien Orifice for 90 minutes. Then he did the Wet T-shirt contest is this new one, and he did Montana. So it's very detailed breakdown of every note in this Zappa
Mhm.
complex Zappa things. And a lot of older Zappa people like it, but they go, "What's the point?" You know, I don't read music. It's fun, but he will take things that are like, what did Frank get from Edgar Varese? We just know Frank was influenced by him, but he can specifically show you, here's the
Mhm.
note structure, he's a pattern recognizer, you know.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
he just did the Fembot and the Wet T-shirt, that little complex part of Wet T-shirt, and he
Yeah.
did it with Arthur Barrow. So he broke it down with Arthur Barrow. Arthur Barrow was like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. At some
Mhm.
point, like he didn't say that literally, but he went
Mhm.
along, and Arthur helps
Yeah. I think.
us out, you know.
Yeah. I like close readings, but this is probably going a bit
Yeah.
too far for me.
But you're saying a closed reading is what I call tutorial. That's what these
Mm.
video tutorials. That's the same thing.
No, I meant close, uh, um, close readings in the sense that I think the academy is because I'm not sure this guy is part of the academy. Is he a musicologist, or is he affiliated with any institution? No,
Well,
he's a freelancer. That's good,
no,
but
he's a freelancer who he went to Peabody. He learned,
mhm,
he knows the structure of music really well. And
mhm,
then COVID hits. So he's sitting around. And then there's like 3 or 4 of these
mhm,
tutorial, Zappa tutorial people
yeah,
online that break down Zappa's music. And, some of them are too academic. At least Tyler has great graphics, great video
mhm,
clips, and a sense of humor, you know.
yeah.
So some
Mhm.
of it is too stodgy. But anyways,
I
let's
check it
go
out.
on. This opens up this a lot. How did Frank Zappa shape your behavior?
Um, I think well, for a long time, he was an inspiring figure because of his stubbornness. Uh, I always thought of him. I never knew him personally, but I met people who, like you, knew him personally, and they were insisting on this kind of determination that governed his behavior and his life, never giving up, and also the idea that someone could write the kind of music that was in his head and never on the radio, and that he this could all happen in a place like Lancaster, or in a non-place. I I I I thought that was pretty impressive. Uh, but also, it shaped my life also, in the sense that I realized very early, when I got interested in his music, that um, a lot of work was involved. And for a long time, not anymore now. I'm 53, and I need my hours of sleep. But for a long time, I only slept for 4 or 5 hours, sometimes 3 or 4 hours a night. And I was really fiercely and uncompromisingly committed to the stuff I was doing. And that, I think, was somehow inspired by his example.
Well put. So who did you talk to who knew him?
My brother, again, he knew, he had all of his records, and he was buying them as they were released.
But
And we
you
were,
mean he literally knew him? He
oh,
didn't
we
physically.
knew. Oh, sorry, I misunderstood you.
You
Yeah, well, I played with the odd gig with Ed Mann.
Oh, that's right, Ed
Uh,
Man.
yeah, we played and I met quite a few at the Zappenale Festival in Germany,
Right.
which was a great place to get in touch with them. I also
Yeah.
spent quite a lot of time with Jimmy Carl Black, and yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay, so we're almost out of here. What a pleasure, dude. This has been amazing. I hope we can do some more salons together on
I
guitarists.
really enjoyed it. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
there's a lot of guitarists I love to talk about. John McLaughlin, I'd love to talk about. He's huge, huge, pre, once we started hearing Intermounting Flame, then, I mean, we were hearing nobody says extrapolation anymore. I mean, I don't hear that word, but, when we heard that, that was, you know, mind blowing. And it
And the
was
Tony
fun.
Williams lifetime.
Say it
Um,
again.
the early days of the Tony Williams lifetime.
That's it. Tony Williams' Lifetime. I had that
Amazing.
album. And then when when McLaughlin opened for Frank, the great line was Frank said, "Okay, Ralph and Chester get double bass drums." That's what when he
All
heard
right.
Billy do the double bass, double bass drums. And what gives you the most optimism?
Hmm. Um, I think it's a stupid answer, but my children do give me a
Yeah.
sense of optimism. But also the fact that if all else collapses, if I still have my books out there and my guitar, which is over there,
Yeah.
I won't get bored, and I probably can live for another few years.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not a stupid answer. 90% of people say youth, children. That's not stupid. And in fact, this great McLuhan person told me last week when he teaches, he said, there are no stupid answers,
Hmm.
which is an amazing
There are,
thing. There's stupid
yeah.
questions, and I ask a lot of them, but there are no stupid answers because an answer isn't
Hmm.
stupid. It's like, to me, there aren't really stupid questions because that's what's inherent. If you don't know something, that's why you're asking it. But people go, well, it
Hmm.
depends on how you word it. But
Yeah.
I think that's why Frank did things like, well, we should do one bonus. I forgot. This is a good one. In Frank, I'll say it after we do this. So these are 5 questions by Alan Watts, just off the top of your head, in a couple words. One, who started it all?
Hmm. Well, that big note that some scientists discovered and heard back in the 70s. I don't know, I don't remember the name of the scientist, but they heard that the universe sounded like a B flat note.
Oh, that's good. So you're anthropomorphizing a sound. That's really good because at the end of his life, Frank was talking to Captain Beefheart, and they both watched the PBS documentary on the Big Bang. And Frank said to Don, he said, "What came before the Big Bang?" And Don said, "The big." Okay, that was really good. B flat, the big note. Okay, here's question number 2, Alan Watts. Are we going to make it?
Probably, yeah.
Where do we put it?
Mm, in our stash.
Who's cleaning it up?
Mm, I don't know about that.
Is it serious?
Yes.
Wow, because Frank said, "I'm very serious about being not serious." And then, you know, um, I was talking to Simon Prentice, the guy who translated Frank's lyrics into you ever meet Simon? He's a great
Never.
Zappa.
Mhm.
Yeah. Where you hopefully you'll be in one of our salons because he joins us often. And we brought this up that Frank asked the question, shall we take ourselves seriously? He didn't say, don't be serious or come on, people, be serious. Because I think in the long run, that's what probably helped kill Frank because he was too serious.
Mhm.
Even though he had a great sense of humor, it was just like lighten up a little, dude. But he was so driven. Like you said, that's how he shaped your behavior because you saw here's a guy who's driven. He's not fucking making money as a rock star and getting high and kicking back. He's like, no, I'm working. In fact, that's what
Mhm.
Arthur Barrow does in this video I'll send you right now by Tyler on Wet T-shirt Fembot. Arthur has this great line. He goes, we're all like looking at the girls at the airport, like, wow, check her out. And Frank's there working on music. He whipped out his, he's writing
Mhm.
music all the time. And, who knows? Maybe that's what killed him or, contributed to killing him or
Yeah,
not.
well, because of the lack of lightness, perhaps. Yeah.
You got to chill out sometimes. But,
Yeah.
maybe Frank's mission was I'm going to give you 50 years of my life creating,
Mm,
60 albums in 30 years. And that's a lot. I'm
mm,
out of here. That's a lot. He did a
mhm,
lot. He really left us with a lot. So,
mm.
anyways, it's really been a pleasure, Michel. Thank you so much. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much for the smart questions, even the ones I didn't answer. And I talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
Thank you